After 16 loyal years at the company, no sick days, no complaints, and always hitting my targets, I finally took my first real vacation. Sunshine, peace, and a few days with my family, until an email popped up, termination effective immediately. No call. No explanation. Just a cold message from HR. I stared at my screen, stunned. 16 years erased in one click. But they didn't know I wasn't just relaxing, I was planning something big. When I returned, I walked into the building with a calm smile and a folder that would change everything. The ocean breeze was warm on my skin, the sun dipping low as I sat on a balcony overlooking the Caribbean waves. It was the first real vacation I'd taken in years. After 16 years of loyal service to Bracken & Company, I had finally felt like I could step away, relax, and let go. I'd earned it every second. I had worked weekends, missed family dinners, covered for others during holidays. I was the one who stayed behind during downsizing, took on extra responsibilities when departments were merged, and trained more than a dozen junior staffers who now held senior titles. I wasn't just an employee, I was an anchor. So when I received the email, the subject line reading immediate termination notice, I thought it had to be a mistake. I blinked at the screen. It was from HR. No greeting, no context, just a dry 2-paragraph note telling me my services were no longer needed effective immediately, citing restructuring and cost-cutting measures. No phone call, no warning, nothing. My heart dropped. The air around me felt heavy. I read it again. And again. It made no sense. I was on approved leave. I had emails confirming it. My manager had even wished me a good trip. I was part of 2 major projects. There were clients I was handling directly. I was a department lead, for God's sake. This had to be some clerical error. I called my manager, no answer. I called HR, voicemail. I sent a reply to the email, requesting clarification. No response. In disbelief, I contacted my colleague Ryan, someone I had mentored. His voice was uneasy when he picked up. Hey, yeah. I heard. I'm sorry. They announced it in a meeting yesterday. Said it was a strategic move. I don't understand it either. Strategic move? Ryan went quiet, then whispered, "There's something else. They gave your role to Amber." Amber? The intern-turned assistant who had only been with us for 9 months? I had trained her myself. She barely knew the company's software 6 months ago. I thought she was still on probation. My chest tightened. But why? She's not ready for that role. What are they doing? He hesitated again. There's talk that she's close to Darren. Darren, the new HR director who came in 6 months ago. Flashy suits, smug smile, always talking over people in meetings. I remembered seeing them laughing a little too closely during last month's company retreat. I thought nothing of it at the time. That's when it hit me. I wasn't fired because of budget cuts. I was pushed out. Deliberately. And while I was on vacation, so I couldn't even defend myself. I spent the rest of that day numb. The vacation that was supposed to refresh me had turned into something bitter. I walked back into my hotel room, sat in silence, and began writing everything I knew: names, incidents, dates. Every email. Every inconsistency. I wasn't going to roll over and take this quietly. If they thought I'd vanish quietly into the background, they didn't know me at all. When I returned home, the first thing I did was visit my attorney. Sarah had helped me once before with a workplace issue years ago, and now I needed her again. "This is wrongful termination," she said after scanning through the documents. and possibly retaliation, depending on what we dig up. I smiled for the first time in days. Over the next few weeks, while they celebrated their victory and patted themselves on the back for their strategic realignment, I was gathering receipts. My lawyer sent formal requests for documentation, and we obtained emails through Discovery that made the situation clearer than ever. Darren had orchestrated the whole thing. There were internal messages praising Amber, mocking my old-school methods, and even suggesting they needed to refresh the office vibe with younger energy. It wasn't about performance. It was ageism and personal favoritism, all under the guise of restructuring. Sarah said we had a solid case. But that wasn't enough for me. I wanted more than just legal justice. I wanted them to feel what they did to me. I wanted them to know who they'd underestimated. So, I did something unexpected. I started sharing my story. First anonymously on a popular workplace forum. Then under my name, in a LinkedIn post. I detailed how I had been fired while on vacation after 16 years of loyal service. I described how I had trained the person who took my job. I ended it with a single line. To everyone who's ever been blindsided by the job they gave their all to, this one's for you. I hit publish. Within hours, it started gaining traction. Hundreds of likes. Then thousands. Former colleagues, strangers, even corporate leaders were commenting, sharing their own experiences. The story resonated. Then a message popped into my inbox from a journalist at a well-known business magazine. "We'd love to interview you. Your story is striking a chord." And that's when I realized this wasn't just about me anymore. This was bigger. Within minutes of it going live, my phone started buzzing nonstop. Friends, old colleagues, even a few people I hadn't heard from in years were texting me. "Is this really you? Just read the piece. You're amazing. I'm so sorry this happened, but proud of you for speaking up." The story made its way through the professional community like wildfire. The article didn't just paint me as a victim, it framed me as someone who refused to be quietly discarded. It highlighted the pattern so many workers had seen but few dared to expose. And with my detailed timeline, emails, and documentation, all carefully reviewed by my lawyer, it carried undeniable weight. By lunchtime, the company's LinkedIn page had turned into a war zone. Hundreds of comments flooded their latest post about company culture, calling them out for hypocrisy. Employees, both past and present, chimed in, some anonymously, others bravely under their real names. Stories emerged, people describing similar experiences, others confirming the toxic changes since Darren took over HR. I didn't expect it to explode like this. But I welcomed it. And then, the most unexpected thing happened. A message request popped up from Helen Morrison, one of the members of the company's board. I remembered meeting her once at a company awards dinner years ago. She was reserved, observant, one of the few who actually listened more than she spoke. Her message was brief. "We need to talk. This has gone too far." I replied, and within an hour, we were on a video call. Helen's expression was tight, her lips drawn into a thin line. I read the article. I also read the comments. This isn't just a PR nightmare, it's a structural failure. And I've been blind to it. She paused, then said, "We weren't informed about your termination. At least, not the board as a whole. We were told you had resigned voluntarily. That you were pursuing a new direction." My mouth dropped open. I have emails, documents. Proof that I was let go without warning while on vacation. "I believe you," she said quickly. "I've seen enough." Darren circumvented protocol. And the CEO signed off without notifying us. We've seen this pattern before, but it's never gone public. Until now. She leaned in closer. Would you be willing to speak at the upcoming emergency board meeting? Off the record, for now. Just so the rest of us understand the full picture? I agreed. Absolutely. 2 days later, I sat across from a virtual room of board members. Faces I barely knew. Names I remembered from old memos. And I told them everything. Not with bitterness or theatrics, but with facts, timelines, and calm clarity. I showed them the emails. The sudden shift in tone after Darren's arrival. The way I was dismissed while on approved leave. The promotions handed out to underqualified favorites. The language used behind closed doors. When I finished, there was silence. Then one board member said, "I feel like we've been played." Another added, "This reflects horribly on all of us." Helen nodded solemnly. "We have serious cleaning up to do." I didn't expect what came next. "We want to offer you a formal apology," Helen said. "And we want to offer you your position back. On your terms. We'll be placing Darren on administrative leave pending full investigation. We're reviewing all HR practices over the last year." I should have felt vindicated, overjoyed even. But I didn't answer right away. "I appreciate that," I said slowly. "But this goes beyond me getting my job back. This is about setting a precedent. What's to stop this from happening to someone else?" Helen nodded again. "We agree. That's why we'd also like to offer you a consulting role, independent from HR or management, where you'll work directly with us to design safeguards, review terminations, and ensure this never happens again. You'll have a voice." I hadn't expected that. They didn't want to just cover up the mess, they wanted to fix the system. I asked for a few days to consider. They agreed, and by the time we ended the call, I sat alone in my living room, feeling something I hadn't felt in weeks: power. Not anger. Not grief. Power. And I wasn't done yet. I posted a follow-up on LinkedIn, thanking the community for supporting my story, emphasizing the importance of speaking up, and sharing how the board had responded. I didn't mention names. I didn't gloat. I simply said this. Sometimes the loudest message is the one you send when you refuse to disappear quietly. I chose to speak up. You can, too. Within minutes, the post went viral again. I had become more than an ex-employee. I had become a voice for countless others. And as the company scrambled to do damage control, restructure policies, and clean house, one thing became clear. They fired the wrong person. After the board meeting, everything moved quickly, faster than I had anticipated. Word had spread throughout the company about the internal investigation. Employees who had once been silent began stepping forward. Anonymous tips were submitted to the board's ethics hotline. Former coworkers reached out to me privately, thanking me for starting something they never had the courage to. But I wasn't interested in being a hero. I just wanted justice, for myself, and for every person who had ever been discarded without dignity. The next week, I met again with Helen Morrison, this time in person. We sat across from each other at a quiet cafe, and she slid a folder across the table, this time, not to fire me, but to offer me a newly created role, employee integrity consultant. I'd report directly to the board. I would have full access to internal HR operations, and the autonomy to build a more transparent employee support system. The offer came with compensation that matched my 16 years of loyalty, and then some. I paused. "This is generous," I said. "But if I take this role, it won't be ceremonial. I'm not here to fix optics. I'm here to fix culture." Helen smiled. That's exactly why we want you. I took the job. On my first day back, this time not as an employee in a cubicle, but as someone walking into the executive wing, I noticed the shift immediately. Conversations quieted when I passed. Some eyes looked away, unsure whether to smile or apologize. I wasn't angry. I understood. Sometimes silence wasn't about guilt. It was about shame. Darren, unsurprisingly, was nowhere to be seen. He'd been placed on indefinite leave pending the outcome of the investigation. Rumors swirled that he was lawyering up. But the board had a legal team, and they were armed with documentation, including mine. I requested access to recent exit interviews and HR records. The pattern was as obvious as it was disturbing: dozens of employees pushed out quietly, many during PTO or parental leave. HR write-ups created retroactively. Performance issues marked without any prior documentation. It was a quiet purge masked as restructuring. I drafted a report, 20 pages long, detailing everything. At the next board meeting, I presented it without sugarcoating anything. I named names. I highlighted negligence. I emphasized how these actions weren't just unethical, they were opening the company to massive legal exposure. One board member leaned back and muttered, "How did we not see this?" Another replied, "Because we weren't looking." Change didn't happen overnight. But for the first time in years, the door had cracked open. As part of my new role, I set up monthly town halls where employees could ask anonymous questions and voice concerns. I created a digital archive of every HR policy and made it available to every employee. I started a mentorship initiative for mid-level workers who felt overlooked or undervalued. Within weeks, trust began to rebuild. Still, not everyone was happy to see me. A few executives, especially those who had benefited from Darren's rise, tried to ice me out, using subtle tactics, excluding me from meetings, forgetting to CC me on important emails. But I was used to that game. And now, I didn't have to play it quietly. I logged everything. After one particularly tense meeting, one VP said snidely, "You know, not everything is a conspiracy." I smiled. True. But after what happened, forgive me for choosing documentation over blind trust. They backed off. Then came the real turning point. One afternoon, I received an email from Michael, the company's largest client. He had read my story and reached out, not just to express support, but to say he was reconsidering his contract with the company after hearing how I was treated. He had built his brand around integrity, and our handling of the situation didn't align with his values. Helen and I set up a meeting with him. I walked him through everything we were changing, from HR policy reform to accountability at the top. By the end of the call, he leaned forward and said, "I believe in second chances. But only when people show they've learned." We retained the contract. Later that evening, Helen texted me. "You just saved a $20 million deal. Not bad for someone they tried to erase." I didn't smile out of smugness. I smiled because it was the first time in a long time I felt like I was seen. A few months later, the investigation concluded. Darren was officially terminated for cause. His contract was voided, no severance, no references. The board issued a formal apology to every employee who had been wrongly terminated under his watch. Some were offered reinstatement. Others received settlements. It wasn't perfect. But it was progress. One morning, I received a letter in my mailbox. No return address. Inside was a handwritten note. "I never said anything when they let me go. I thought maybe I deserved it. Thank you for showing me I didn't." There was no signature. But I kept the letter anyway. My office now overlooked the city skyline. Every morning when I arrived, I made it a point to greet every person I passed: janitors, receptionists, interns, managers. I remembered what it felt like to be ignored. I promised myself I'd never forget. One afternoon, I passed by the break room where two younger employees were chatting. "She's the one they fired on vacation, right?" one whispered. The other nodded. "And now she's in charge of HR." They didn't know I was standing behind them. I smiled and said, "Correction, I'm not in charge of HR. I'm in charge of making sure HR never forgets who they work for." They laughed nervously. But I wasn't upset. It was the truth. In the end, I didn't just get my job back, I got my voice back. And with it, I rebuilt something far more valuable than a title or a paycheck. I rebuilt respect. 16 years ago, I walked into that company full of hope, ambition, and a desire to contribute. Over the years, I gave it my all. I stayed late, met deadlines, trained new hires, and weathered economic downturns. I wasn't just an employee, I was a cornerstone. And yet, in the blink of an eye, all of that had been dismissed with a cold email during my vacation. That moment could have broken me. But instead, it woke something up inside me. I realized that loyalty is not a one-way street. You can dedicate your life to a company, but if it doesn't respect your humanity, that loyalty means nothing. That's why I didn't beg to come back. I demanded change. And I used every tool I had: documentation, allies, and most of all, the truth, to make it happen. What I learned through all of this is that silence protects power, and that real change often starts with a single act of courage. I wasn't brave because I wasn't afraid, I was brave because I was terrified, and I stood up anyway. And now, when I walk into work, I don't see just walls and desks, I see people who feel heard, seen, and valued. I see policies that protect, not punish. I see young employees looking at me not with pity, but with inspiration. Because now they know that one voice, one determined, unwavering voice, can shake the whole system. And I'm proud that voice was mine.